Hi, Rita.
Hi, Amanda.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
Not really. Kind of dying inside slightly.
I actually have an antidote to that.
Okay, what is it?
So, I don't know when you're going to listen to this or if anybody's listening to this, but if you do, this is the week that Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed as the Supreme Court Justice.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody who isn't a white male or a woman cozying up to the patriarchy is pretty upset in America.
Devastated.
So my friend Erica posted this poem today, and I thought I would start out with this because I think it'll help.
Okay.
It's called Revenge
Ooh.
by Elisa Chavez. Since you mention it, I think I will start that race war. I could have swung either way, but now I'm definitely spending the next 4 years converting your daughters to lesbianism.
There you go.
I'm going to eat all your guns, swallow them lock, stock, and barrel, and spit bullet casings onto the dinner table. I'll give birth to an army of mixed-race babies, with fathers from every continent and genders to outnumber the stars. My legion of multiracial babies will be intersectional as fuck, and your swastikas will not be enough to save you. Because real talk, you didn't stop the future from coming. You just delayed our coronation. We have the same deviant haircuts we had yesterday. We are still getting gay married like nobody's business, because it's still nobody's business. There's a Muslim kid in Kansas who has already written a schematic for the robot that will steal your job in manufacturing. And that robot will also be gay. So get used to it. We didn't manifest the mountain by speaking its name. The buildings here are not on your side just because you make them spray-painted accomplices. These walls do not have genders, and they all think you suck. Even the earth found common cause with us, the way you trample us both. Oh yeah. There'll be signs and rainbow-colored drum circles and folks arguing ideology until even I want to punch them. But I won't, because they're my family, in that blood of the covenant sense. If you've never loved someone like that, you cannot outwaltz us. We have all the good dancers anyway. I confess, I don't know if I'm alive right now. I haven't heard my heartbeat in days. I keep holding my breath for the moment the plane goes down, and I have to save enough oxygen to get my friends through. But I finally found the argument against suicide, and it's us. We're the effigies that haunt America's nights harder the longer they spend burning us. We are scaring the shit out of people by spreading, by refusing to die. What are we but a fire? We know everything we do is so the kids after us will be able to follow something towards safety. What can I call us but lighthouse? Of course I'm terrified. Of course I'm a shroud. And of course it's not fair, but rest assured, anxious America, you brought your fists to a glitter fight. This is a taco truck rally and all you have is coleslaw. You cannot deport our minds. We won't hold funerals for our potential. We have always been what makes America great.
That is amazing.
Yeah, shout out to Elisa Chavez. If I'm not allowed to read your poem and you happen to stumble upon this podcast, you let us know. I'll delete it. But I feel like I did it some justice.
Yes.
And I felt like it really, this morning when I read it, I was like, it was written obviously right after the election.
Mm-hmm.
But it still obviously feels pretty timely.
Pretty damn relevant right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's very empowering because it's hard not to get into that place in my mind because I go there of just wallowing, but it's like don't give up. It's not over. It's just starting.
Yeah, I've been working on leaning into rage because it's helping with staying away from despair.
Yeah. It
feels really hard though. Like when that poem was written, it was in January of 2017 when the first, like the inauguration happened. It was the first Women's March. And we had a lot of fire and power, and we didn't know yet how terrible it would be.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all had an inkling. And of course, we expected the worst. But I don't know about you, but I think it's actually worse than I expected.
It is worse than I expected. I didn't expect such just a backlash and like not just being pushed backwards, but I'm being knocked down and dragged.
Yeah.
And also being beaten with clubs while it's happening.
I loved what she said, though. I found the best argument against suicide, and it's us.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Power in
powerful.
numbers. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, it's waking me up a little bit more because I think I am at fault for taking what I have right now for granted. And right now it's really looking really scary. It's looking really real. And I'm like, holy crap, need to do something. I need to be more involved. I'm raising a son right now. I need to make sure that he's not going to be the one that's carrying this on for the next generation or for whatever partner or person he wants to be or his kids.
Yeah. I don't know her.
I don't know her.
The podcast where we talk about someone that you should know that you don't know, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say that mine, if you are at all versed in gay history, you would probably have heard of this person or at least heard the legend of this person.
All right. Do you want to start us off?
I can.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share about your week or your day or your weekend? Also, by the way, can I just say that how long has it been? How many days sober are we?
Oh, yes. Currently, so 47, 48 days. I'm coming up on 60. Fist bump. Yes. Newly sober, was in a very, very desperate, dark hole of alcoholism. Pretty prevalent. Yeah. And Amanda was a witness to it, and she was one of my life rafts. So that was awesome. Her and her wife. Changing that mindset for myself and admitting to myself that I have a drinking problem. I am an alcoholic. I cannot drink anymore. It was heartbreaking because I had such a love affair with alcohol. It really was a cure-all for me, but then it just became a complete poison for me. I know it's not the same for everybody, but it was for me. So taking that choice to just stop has been really difficult, but very empowering. And like I said, I'm up at 6:30 this morning.
I can't even believe it.
And I was pumped. I do not wake up at 6:30.
Folks, this is a person who, if I texted before 11 a.m., good luck.
True. Good luck if I was awake, if I was still drunk or hungover as fuck and mad at the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just really proud of you.
Thank you.
And I think that you've been doing an amazing job. And I'm not going to tell your personal shit, but she did face a situation the other night that in the past would have been extremely tempting, and made a better choice and left that situation. And I think that's a sign of tremendous progress. And I think it's really cool that you did that.
Real choices. Yeah.
Anyway, I really am proud of you. I'm so excited that you're working this hard. And I will say that, real talk from this side, we were enablers of that drinking because we were also using alcohol, particularly since the election of Donald Trump, to sort of lick our wounds, I guess. And it was a really easy way to escape. And we had to do some hard work looking at how we also used alcohol in a way that was unhealthy, and our relationship with it was unhealthy. And we've both we've cut back a lot on how much we drink. And it's improved a lot of things. It's improved my ability to wake up in the morning. It's improved my mood, the way I interact with other human beings. I'm not so short-tempered. It's really, it's helpful. And alcohol's really bad for you. And I know that, but I really like it.
I know it's hard. What's there not to like about it? I mean, the effect is wonderful. It
Tastes good.
Tastes good. Makes you feel pretty. Makes me feel beautiful. Yeah.
I felt pretty great last night.
Well, you looked beautiful last night, so that
you.
was
I
a true
appreciate
story.
that.
She did. She looked hot.
Okay, so let's start us off. I'm going to talk about a person, like I said before, who is relatively well known in gay lore.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Stormé DeLarverie?
I don't know her.
Okay. Stormé was born on December 24th, Christmas Eve,
Nice.
in New Orleans, to a black mother and a white father.
Mixed race.
Already, it's 1920, it's the South, mixed race. We got some shit.
Yeah.
Her mother was actually a servant for her father's family. That's how they sort of hooked up. And
What?
his family was very wealthy.
Oh, this sounds like a sexy novel already.
I know. Stormé was really light-skinned, and that caused a lot of bullying for her as a young person. And she wasn't, she talks about it as not being black enough for the black community, not being white enough for the white community. Obviously, a refrain that many people who have mixed backgrounds have experienced. I think it was especially hard for her because they didn't have the name for it and she didn't have the recognition yet, but she was also sort of gender non-conforming from the start. So I think Stormé was also really good at creating her own yarns because I watched a little documentary about her, and she's the one speaking and telling her background. And she said that she lived with the documentary said that she had eventually moved in with her paternal grandfather, so her white grandfather, and that he sort of was the one who raised her and like privately educated her. And then I read in a different thing that her father and mother got married and moved to California. And that would have been a pretty big deal in the 1920s for a mixed race couple to get married. Yeah. And that they all lived in California together. So I don't know which one is true. And that theme is going to come up a couple of times in Stormy's story, which actually I kind of like. It's like a choose your own adventure. Stormé was bullied a lot. Sometimes she was also being bullied for being wealthy, like from a wealthy family. And I can see how that would probably be a problem.
That's a lot of cards against her already.
Yeah. And her grandfather sat her down and said, you keep running from all these bullies. And if you keep running, you're never going to stop running. You're always going to spend the rest of your life running away from the things that are difficult. So you got to figure it out. So after that, she stopped running. She faced down her two biggest bullies, these two kids who were like especially mean to her, and beat the holy hell out of them.
How old was she? Do you know?
It was before she was 15.
Oh, shit.
So she was 15. She says it stopped after 15. So I assume that either it happened around that time or what have you. But it's like one of the stories she tells a lot, that her grandfather told her, you someday you have to stop running or always be running. And she said, that's the day I decided to stop. So she had these two bullies that like she beat them up, and that was the persona then she took on.
A fighter. Yeah.
Yeah. And as a teen, she joined the Ringling Brothers circus.
At 13?
No, as a teen.
As a teen. I thought you said 13.
Yeah, joined the Ringling Brothers circus.
Literally joined the circus.
She literally joined the circus and
I'm a freak, y'all. Here I go.
She actually rode the horses, the jumping horses.
Jumping horses?
Yeah, the ones that would do like the fancy jumps, the white horses that do all the jumps. And because she was a lady, she had to ride side saddle.
Oh, yeah.
Which she said it beat the hell out of her butt. And one time she fell off the horse and fractured a whole bunch of bones. And she was like, that's done. I'm done with that. So she stopped being in the circus after that and stopped also being an equestrian. And she came out as a lesbian around 18 years old, which if you do your math, that means it's the late 1930s.
Difficult.
And I read an interview with her, and the interviewer asked, like, well, that was probably pretty difficult, or made a comment about, 1930s being out. And Stormé said, oh, well, they didn't call us gay back then. They had another name for us. They called us fucking queers.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that's obviously a topic for another time, but we've sort of reclaimed the word queer, but there are older people in the spectrum who really hate that young people use that word because it was so vicious against them when they were young. So I would assume she's one of those, she might be one of those people, because the way she talked about it in this interview was like, this was the worst thing she could have been called. She was actually a really terrific singer. She was a baritone.
Ooh.
Yeah, she had this really deep, low voice. And so when she first started performing, she would dress like a lady. She'd do the like 1930s, think like Billie Holiday, like that beautiful hair and makeup and dresses. But she kept getting arrested for being a drag queen.
What?
Because the police thought she was a man in a dress.
Oh my goodness.
So that's what I was saying earlier about, I think that some of the bullying she incurred probably was a perception, at the very least, that she was gender nonconforming, that she had this sort of I think about my wife in that way, like always was more masculine. She's
Yes.
a woman through and through. She identifies as a woman. There's never been any question in her mind, but others perceive her as something else, you know.
Well, I mean, I can identify with that because I was bullied as a preteen and as a teen because I liked to play with more masculine looks. And growing up in a little town where it's very like just a lot of Mexicans, there's a lot of machismo going on over there. So this girl with like, you know, wearing boys' clothes with a wallet chain, of course they were going to tease the shit out of her. And I had the same issue too. I wasn't Mexican enough for the Mexicans and I wasn't white enough for the white people. I was right in the middle line because I wasn't raised in a traditional Mexican home, so they didn't like me. And then the white kids were like, well, we don't want to hang out with this Mexican, so I hung out by myself.
Kids are harsh.
Are terrible.
They're terrible, some of them. I loved that she was arrested because they thought she was a drag queen. I mean, I don't love that police arrested drag queens in the first place, but one of the police officers was like, you should just start performing as a man. And then you won't get arrested.
Oh, jeez.
And that police officer taught her how to tie a bow tie.
Really?
And so she was like, to this day, in the documentary, she said that to this day, I can tie a bow tie in the dark with a blindfold on it because of this officer. And she was really interesting. She kind of excused away his behavior. She was like, he was just doing his job. He was just doing what he was supposed to do. And I was like, that's... I don't have that kind of empathy today for like the way police officers have and always have, and I think always will be the perpetuators of like really shitty injustices in our system. And as somebody who was mixed race and gender nonconforming and gay, I find it really admirable that she can be like, oh, they were just doing their job. She doesn't feel like that later.
Okay.
But that particular police officer. So she ended up joining a traveling drag troupe called the Jewel Box Review in 1955. So whenever they were traveling around, the newspapers would have headlines that said, you know, Jewel Box Review, you know, like 12 guys and one girl. And eventually it was 25 guys and one girl.
Oh, wow.
She was always the only female performer in the troupe. But they were very well known in musical theater, in drag and black communities and things like that. All of the men performed in women's clothes and she performed in men's clothes. And she would perform, but she was also the MC.
That is awesome. Couldn't you just imagine that? Like that person hosting and being the light, kind of the, you know, the life and the soul of the entertainment.
After these incidents with these police officers, and they said, you should perform in drag as a drag king. Her hair was short. She would draw on a little mustache. She would wear this tux, a little bow tie. And she just looked so cute. The photos are so cute.
How curious, too, that the police officer who's arresting her, thinking she's a guy in a dress, encourages her to be a woman.
Well, he's like, you'll catch less grief if you just look like a man. We'll just assume you're a man.
Do you think that wasn't coming from like a helpful standpoint? Or do you think he was just like, I'm tired of you getting arrested?
Well, I think he must have been at some point trying to be helpful. I mean, he did teach her how to tie a bow tie. I assume the way that came about, because she doesn't go into detail, is she must have said, well, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to dress like a man. Like, to this point, it seems as though she probably always looked like a traditional lady in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And at this point, she starts dressing in men's clothes, not just while she's performing, but she becomes more comfortable and dresses in them outside of the clubs. So she starts dressing like a man all the time. And this is in like the 50s and 60s.
Oh, wow.
So she's really kind of breaking down a lot of barriers in a lot of ways. Of course, at the time, the U.S. is still deeply segregated. And their drag troupe, their entertainment troupe, featured both black and white performers. And it seems as though, according to everything I was able to read, the Jewel Box wouldn't perform in theaters that didn't allow the black performers to be on stage with white performers.
Okay.
That meant that they often traveled the African American theater circuit. So she performed at the Apollo in Harlem a lot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. What's interesting is that the Jewel Box Revue became such an important part of not just gay theater or black theater, but also all of theater, that when the Broadway musical A Chorus Line was created, there's actually a line that refers to the Jewel Box Revue.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So now I'm going to have to watch that and figure out which one the line is. At some point in this time, she starts dating a renowned artist named Diane Arbus. And Diane was also a really great photographer, and that's where some of the really great photos of Stormé can be found, are her photos.
Would love to see the photos.
Stormé says that most nights Diane would sit in the balcony and watch her perform, and I think toured with them, would go around with them to certain places. So that was her life throughout the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Now the 60s arrive.
Oh, some fun times, right?
And at this point, Stormé is mostly performing in gay clubs with this troupe in New York. So they're going to Harlem, they're in Brooklyn, they're in Greenwich Village. They're going around to predominantly black theaters and performing drag shows. This is when drag shows were also like original performances. Now we think of them like lip syncs.
Oh, so this was actual
they all
singing.
sang.
Okay.
So one night in June of 1969, Stormé and many others would spark the gay rights movement. The NYPD had been cracking down on what they considered homosexual activity at the time. They were getting pressure to do so. There's a lot of stuff with the mob and the police and stuff like that. And so it's more complicated, but the simplified version is they had been showing up at gay clubs and arresting people for just existing. June 27th, 1969, they show up at the Stonewall Inn. This was a particularly brutal one. And there is a butch lesbian who is dragged by the crowd, who are all standing outside the club watching this happen. Drag queens are being arrested, whatever, but there's this one butch lesbian who keeps fighting the cops and running away. And then they catch her again and they bring her in front of the crowd, and it gets progressively more violent. And at one point, one of the cops clubs her over the head with a nightstick.
Jeez.
And she looks up from the ground and looks directly at the crowd and says, "Why don't you do something?" Then they throw her in the back of the police wagon and shit just explodes.
Was it a riot?
Well, it's called the Stonewall Riots, but she really hates that term, because she said it wasn't a riot, it was a rebellion, it was an uprising, it was a revolution. Riots, in her mind, I think
the connotation is negative.
It's you can just push it away as like, oh, they were just
rioting. Yeah,
they were just
kind
rioting.
of dismisses the fire and the passion and what word am I looking for?
The injustice that they were fighting. So people vary on this, but most people agree that this butch lesbian that started the Stonewall Rebellion was Stormé.
Really?
And she said it was her too. She said she was the one the cops were roughing up, that they clubbed her over the head. A couple other people is like, no, it wasn't her, it was somebody else, some other butch lesbian. But it's like, she was really well known. She was always at the Stonewall Inn. She was always performing, and she was always in drag. It's like, it's her.
Come on.
She was fighting off 4 police officers when she was beaten. The crowd just erupts, and night after night after that, the Stonewall Rebellion just continues.
And this Stonewall Inn, so I'm familiar with Stonewall as the term and the name, but I didn't know, so I'm learning right now what the story is about. Was it like a place where they all... Was it a bar or was it?
Yeah, it was a bar, and it was seedy.
Okay.
And it was, they would have drag performances, and one of the other people who really was very instrumental in the rebellion was Marsha P. Johnson, who was a black trans woman who also was there that night. Mm-hmm. So there's the two of them together are really who I think of as the reason why the movement started.
Okay.
And so it was a black trans woman and it was a biracial butch lesbian, and they fucking took on everything.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why there was a movie that came out a couple years ago called Stonewall that is terrible and nobody should watch, because it's all about this like cute white gay boy and that he's the reason why everything starts.
What?
Oh, it's a complete rewriting of history in a way. It's a literal whitewashing of history.
Fuck.
And it's upsetting because, you know, you cannot erase the contributions of people, especially people who were, in the case of like Stormé, literally putting her body on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And then to make that person a young white male.
Because it's going to appeal.
In like 2016, I was like, really? Fuck you.
I didn't know a movie was made, so I'm glad I didn't know that movie was made, because I would have been misinformed by now.
Yeah, and people were upset. It wasn't like it was universally disliked by critics because this was not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Stormé became known as the gay community's Rosa Parks, which I love.
That's awesome.
She became a fixture amongst the community, and after the Stonewall Rebellion, she still performed a little bit, but then it was like the same year, I think, of the Stonewall Rebellion, her partner died, Diane.
Oh no. Do you know how she died?
I don't. I couldn't find a whole lot about their relationship.
Okay.
So I wanted to put it, they were together for like 25 or 27 years or something.
I wonder if they carried it a little close to the vest, kept it very private and personal.
My guess would be yes, because Diane was quite a famous artist.
Okay.
So she died, and then after that, Stormé stopped performing.
Oh.
But she appointed herself the guardian of the lesbians of the village. She worked as a bouncer in several clubs around Greenwich Village in the 80s and 90s. She had a gun permit, and she always carried a gun. She roamed the streets in the 80s looking out for bullies or abuse.
That is badass. She literally became the protector of the playground.
She called her, like, people called her the gay superhero.
That's so cool.
And she would just literally, like, until the wee hours of the morning, roam the streets with this gun and look out for people who were being dicks. Wow. And would break up shit. She also talked about, like, she would show up. In fact, the night of the Stonewall, I think she said that she wasn't going there for performing or hanging out or whatever. She had been coming, she would come late at night to bail people out of jail or prevent them from getting arrested. She was really, like, she thought of herself as sort of an
advocate.
Yeah, the guardian, the person who's going to take care of everybody. After that, she became a member of the Stonewall Veterans Association. She started out as the chief of security because of her job as a bouncer.
I cannot wait to see a picture of her. I'm sorry. I can't wait.
She eventually worked her way up in the organization to become the vice president. But she didn't just care about queer stuff. She also was really, she was an advocate for children and victims of domestic abuse.
Oh, wow.
So she would hold these like fundraiser events where she would perform. That's the only time she would perform, is at these events that she would organize to raise money to help victims.
So once again, putting her body on the line.
That's right. She lived in the Hotel Chelsea for many years, and she worked as a bouncer until age 85.
Fucking A, yeah. I like that.
The documentary I watched was made in 2001,
mm-hmm.
and she was still working as a bouncer at that point. She didn't stop till she was 85, which would have been 2005. And they have just, it's a documentary, so they have like random shots of her just walking down the street.
Yeah.
She has a presence about her, and she has the ultimate lesbian swagger.
Really? Have you tried in the mirror?
Oh, I can't. It's not. Well, I think I have my own version that's not. It's, but like Abby doesn't even try. She's got it. After that, she fell into some problems. She had legal problems, mental health problems. She lost her housing. She eventually ended up in a nursing home in Brooklyn and diagnosed with dementia.
Oh, wow.
So this is sometime before, around 2010. So she's about 90 years old. Almost 90. it is because she's no longer an actual presence in the neighborhood that people have just sort of forgotten about her. She has no family. She doesn't have a surviving partner. And she's in this shitty nursing home in Brooklyn. The owner of one of the lesbian bars that she used to bounce at sort of decides, like, somebody has to take care of her.
Yeah.
And starts petitioning to become her legal guardian so that she can make decisions for her and get her out of there. A journalist who worked for After Ellen, which is at the time was the lesbian website. It's where I got all of my information on how to be a good lesbian. In 2010, Grace Chu, who worked for After Ellen, realized that somehow decided I need to let everybody know what's happened to Stormé, and goes and interviews her in the nursing home and writes this incredible piece that's 3 pages long that's got all these great pictures and stories and tells the story of Stormy's life. And once that gets published, Stormy's life improves a lot more in terms of access and all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, we need to honor her. So she was honored by Brooklyn Pride in 2012. That same year, a film was made about her. Not the one I watched, but an actual fuller length documentary was made about her. On April 24th of 2014, she was honored alongside Edie Windsor, who's the reason why I have a legal marriage, for her fearlessness and bravery by the Brooklyn Community Pride Center. And she was also presented with a proclamation from the New York City Public Advocate Letitia James. Those happened in April of 2014. But she died a month later on May 24th, 2014, in her sleep at the nursing home where she lived. She had no surviving relatives.
She wasn't able to get out of the nursing home?
Well, the dementia was really bad, but she was in a shitty nursing home, and I think from what I could piece together, after this interview really sort of highlighted her again, they were able to scrap together some money, I think, fundraising, to get her into a better establishment.
Okay.
Because Grace Chu, the writer at After Ellen, was like, this is common. This is what happens to the elders in the gay community.
Yeah.
You know, once their friends die away and they've never had, they don't have a family, they just get left behind and forgotten and shoved into these not so great facilities and left to die.
Left to rot, yeah.
So it was really, I thought, an incredible service that Grace Chu did by putting up this big profile of Stormé in After Ellen. And that was the first time I had ever heard of her. So that was in 2010. I had never heard of Stormé DeLarverie until then. And I read that profile and I thought, oh my God, this is my fucking hero. This woman's amazing. And then she died 4 years later. And when she died, there were obits in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Huffington Post, After Ellen. I mean, the Advocate, literally every single major publication and every major gay publication, highlighted her. And, things like the gay Rosa Parks, the gay superhero, the butch lesbian, the founder of the Stonewall movement, the canary in the coal mine. So that is her. That is Stormé DeLarverie. I got most of my information from, I had already memorized that After Ellen article. I've read it many times. So I got a lot of my information from there. From the short 6.5 documentary on YouTube, which is, I'm going to have to look up every one of these because I didn't know they existed, but it's called In the Life. And it's a series of short documentaries about gay life.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that.
It was made in the early aughts, 2000, 2001. And I also used a little bit of her Wikipedia entry and the Washington Post and New York Times obituaries.
Very cool. That's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
I had no idea who she was.
And I can only hope to be 1 ounce of that badass.
Right. What a protector. Someday I want to be that brave.
I know. I think about those moments when Abby's been like that.
Yeah.
Like that time when a friend of ours was nursing her baby at a brewery. And this random dude just took a picture of her while nursing and said he was going to put it on his Facebook profile. And it was just a complete violation of her privacy. And my wife stood up and was like, give me your phone. You're going to delete that. Like, just called him out and literally shoved him out of the whole bar. Like, he lost his privileges in the bar forever. It was a brewery. It wasn't a bar. It was like, it was a big deal. It was very cool.
It's who that happened to, that woman, is a mutual friend of mine and Amanda's. And so to hear that, you know, Abby was there and protected her, because this girl is definitely a little soft-spoken and
very.
And, you know, sometimes we need people to fight for us. And those are the people that just are true gems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And her husband wasn't in the room at the time. And it's probably a good thing he wasn't, because I don't think it would have gone.
It wouldn't have ended well.
It would not have gone well.
I'm glad I wasn't in the room.
Yeah, it was, I mean, like, I was right there with Abby, but like she's the one who initiated it. Like, because our friend and I, the one who had the picture taken of, she like looked at me while it was happening, and I looked at her, and we both just were like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Is this guy actually doing what I think he's doing?
And it's strange when you're in those moments, when you hear about it later, you're like, oh, I would react. Mm-hmm. And then you're in that moment, but your brain is like going in slow motion because it's traumatized that it's actually happening.
Well, that's what cued Abby. Like, Abby wasn't paying attention. She looked at our friend and my face, and I was going, did that just fucking happen? And Abby looked at me and realized something was wrong, looked at Katrina. Katrina looked upset, and then she turned around and looked at the dude and was like, that motherfucker. Like, she put all the pieces together, but we were in the moment. Like, no, everybody was having side conversations and nobody knew what was happening. Yeah. Just Kay and I knew what was happening. We knew what this guy was doing, and we were like, holy shit, this guy is taking a fucking photo of you. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, not that it would matter, but it's not like her like tit was out and like for everybody to see. Mm-hmm. You know, she had her but like blanket there.
It's so intrusive, yeah.
And it's like, this is how babies get food.
Exactly.
Don't be weird.
No, and I've actually, because I work in the restaurant industry, I am a server. I've had multiple times where a woman's breast is out, and I have seen it. And I'm just like, how natural and beautiful. This baby's getting fed while mom's eating too. Mom's doing a great job taking care of herself and baby as well. But then I get a little overprotective, because then I start looking around and making sure like nobody's saying anything offensive or because I used to nurse, and, you know, I'd be switching sides or something like that. And people would be staring, and I'd get like an eye roll, or I'd get, you know, like a dude would make eye contact and he would look at the ceiling. And I'm like, well, it's, you know, I do realize that they are out, but I mean, baby's just eating. Like, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Well, it's like, it bothers me because we have this weird standard about like men can go shirtless. Mm-hmm. They can run shirtless. They can swim shirtless. You know, if you don't have like the mammary glands, I guess, you can walk around without a top on and nobody will think twice about it. Mm-hmm. But suddenly, if you have a little bit of extra baggage on the front, that's suddenly profane.
And also almost like it's like makes me feel like almost like our bodies are shamed.
Of course. It is absolutely shaming.
Yeah.
They're dirty. There's something dirty and wrong.
But then also it's like, then why are we used for marketing and advertising? Why are we used in music? Like, oh my God.
I know.
If it's so offensive, why are you obsessed
objects
with it?
Yes.
Exactly. You are obsessed with it. So the problem is you. Yeah. Problem is not me.
Oh, actually, that reminds me of something Stormy said.
Oh, what'd she say?
She was talking about racism, and I can't remember the way she worded it, but it was something like, I'm not the one who had a problem. I didn't have a problem with who I was. I didn't have a problem with where I could go. Y'all had the problem.
Yep.
Y'all made the rules that said I couldn't go where I wanted to go.
Just like you guys put up the borders.
Yeah.
You guys drew the lines.
And now you're upset that the lines happen. Yeah. And that people, like, you know, the lines happened to someone else. All right, let's hear about yours. Who you got for me?
So the whole reason I picked this woman was because I saw a quote that's going to lead into another story of another woman that I wanted to highlight. So I'm going to start with the quote. It's from an African American feminist named Audre Lorde. Are you familiar?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yes.
She's also a lesbian.
What?
Yeah.
I did not know that. The quote is, "For the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house." So it's basically, we need to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to restructure things. So the lady that I found was Rebecca Lee Crumpler.
I don't know who that is. When you started with Audre Lorde, I was like, I got this one.
That's just a taste. Okay, Rebecca Lee Crumpler.
No idea.
No idea.
No idea. Really thought you had me. I thought I was going to get this one.
She is the first African American woman to earn a medical degree in the United States. I know.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Crumpler, she was born Rebecca Davis. She was born free February 8th, 1831 to, and I'm hoping I'm saying her father's name right, Absalom and Matilda Davis in Christiana, Delaware. It says no mention of why this happened, but she was separated from her parents. I don't know if they died. I don't know if they gave her up, because it's not uncommon to have too many children and send a couple to live elsewhere. I'm not sure. Of what I read, I couldn't find out what happened.
So she was born free.
She was born free, yes.
So I know, like, did you ever watch, like, 12 Years a Slave?
Yes.
There were people all the time who were taken from free areas in the North and shoved onto the slave trade.
Oh, jeez.
Like, sent to the South. People who had lived their whole lives, raised families. It's really fucked up.
It is very fucked up. So little is known about her early life. The multiple websites that I went to and like the research I did on her, a lot of them said that her early life is very just, there's not a lot of information, but she was raised by her aunt in Pennsylvania and is noted to have provided health care to her infirm neighbors. So her aunt was basically a healthcare provider for her neighbors, and it really influenced and impacted her as just watching her aunt help these people around her. So at age of 21, she moved to Charlestown, Massachusetts. So she's 21 years old. I'm figuring she's probably ready to leave the house, probably looking for a job. Not too uncommon for young girls to be sent out, looking for...
Do you find any information about whether or not she graduated from high school or went to high school or anything?
No high school education. So basically all of her education, her healthcare education, was from learning from her aunt.
Interesting.
So during the next 8 years, she was employed as a nurse for various doctors. Her lack of formal training did not distinguish her from other nurses at the time, because the first school wasn't open till 1873. So there wasn't even any formal schooling for what she was already doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense. And what year is it now? Like, she was born in
1831.
And it was
it
like
is
she was
1852 right now.
Okay,
She's
so it's
21.
like 20 years later before the first nursing school is open.
Mm-hmm. So in 1860, bearing letters of recommendation from the physicians that she was nursing for, she submitted for admittance into an MD program at the New England Female Medical College. So the NEFMC, which I'll refer to throughout this.
New England Female Medical College. So the college itself had a vagina or
It
ovaries
did.
or something?
So this was actually, it was a medical school for primarily females, New England Female Medical College. So the American Medical School administrators shockingly routinely denied entrance to blacks.
Obviously. I mean, we were talking about Stormé earlier. It was the 20s,
Yeah.
and so like this is in the
She already
1850s.
has a lifetime of experience underneath her belt, but
Yeah.
yes.
But segregation and racism.
Mm-hmm. The trustees of the NEFMC admitted Crumpler to their 4-year medical curriculum in 1860. This is a school that had opened in 1848 under the first name, which was the Boston Female Medical College. This was the first female medical college in the world.
Very cool, though. I'm glad it existed.
Yeah. And she's also, I made it sure to note that she's doing this before the first black medical school was opened in 1868. And it's for the first nursing school, like I said, was opened in 1873. So she's already paving the way for schools that are coming in the future, doing this way ahead of time. Also in 1860, there was only about 300 out of 54,543 physicians in the U.S. were women with medical degrees.
How many was it?
300.
300 out of like 58,000 or something?
54,000.
Wow.
300 women at that time. None of them were black.
That sounds of the time.
Yes. February 24th, 1864, her with her two white classmates, they would do your last like finals, they would do them in group. So it was two white females and herself, Mary Lockwood and Elizabeth Kimball. They came before the faculty for their final exams. Each candidate had to have at least 3 years of preparatory coursework, written a thesis, and paid for their graduation fees, which she did all of those. The conclusion of the exam, the faculty voted to recommend Crumpler and her classmates to go ahead with graduation, but they had some hesitation in regards when it came to Rebecca. They were citing that she had deficiencies in her education and she had slow progress, but they said that they were feeling pressured to push her forward, so they hesitantly let her graduate.
So who was pressuring? Who was doing the pressuring?
They were saying, it says, in spite of their reservations, the faculty deferred to the wishes of the trustees and the present state of public feeling.
So there must have been,
pressure.
there must have been like newspaper articles or something written, and she must have gotten support outside of the school. Maybe there were like black groups or something that were, pushing for her graduation.
Mm-hmm. It actually,
and they gave in
some of the writings, it had said that a lot of the doctors she had already worked for were saying, no, she's competent. And I think those were some of the pressures that they're referring to. It was like actual valid doctors saying she's fine. So she did receive her doctorate of medicine at 33 years old. So my age right now, which is pretty neat. I know. According to the school statistics in this period, only about 35% of all the women who attended this college completed the program. That's really stinking low.
Yeah, it is. Then it makes me think like the college existed, but they didn't want women to become doctors.
Well, I'm wondering almost like if some of them got married, dropped out, kind of thing.
Were required to become moms and stay-at-home wives and things like
because
that.
When you become a mom, you stop existing as a woman.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. So with Crumpler's graduation, the number of the NEFMC graduates totaled 48 women in her graduating class. The college ended up closing, though, in 1873, with never graduating another black woman again. So she was
the only one.
The
first and only one.
The first and only. So no records remain of her years at the college, which is really strange to me. There's nothing that remains. There's no personal records of no diary, no personal papers of her struggle or what she went through going through school, anything that she endured or what she had to do to gain admittance as well. Her later writings give no indication that she was even aware of her status as the first black female MD in the U.S. Her future writings also showed that it seems like she was an MD, but she wanted to use that just to further her education as a nurse. She was a doctor, but she wanted nursing to be her priority.
Well, I imagine that getting hired as a doctor, who was also a woman, would have been very difficult. Mm-hmm. Not to mention a black woman.
I know. So it said that it seems likely that Crumpler attended medical school less to enable her practice as a physician, but then to improve her nursing skills. She would later argue, for example, that women should study the mechanism of human structure before assuming the office of nurse. So she really believed in getting all the education you possibly could to become a better nurse. Around the time of her graduation, she got married.
All right.
So can you imagine going to college and also, sparking up a beau?
But she's 33, you said?
She's 33.
So that's pretty late for that time.
So that's already,
it's like middle age.
10 years she's been working as a nurse, putting herself through school, meets a guy, 33 years old, is a doctor, and married. She sounds like a catch.
Yeah, I would want to. Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah. There's very little known about her husband. His name is Arthur. The only thing that is really recorded is he did outlive her. She did pass away first. They remained in Boston after her graduation. She wanted to practice there where she studied and then also to acquire additional training. It says at an unspecified location in the British domain. So I'm not quite sure where the British domain would be.
Yeah, like did she go to England and get more medical training?
Didn't say. Well, it says she stayed in Boston. So I'm wondering if there was some kind of area in Boston that was called the British domain.
Oh,
so I'm not
okay.
sure. So,
Yeah.
So at the end of the Civil War, she moved to Richmond, Virginia to do what she considered real missionary work, which was treating her black patients through an arrangement with the Freedoms Bureau.
Okay.
So she went to impoverished places working with basically men, women, and primarily women and children, particularly poor ones. She was a huge advocate for that. Many Southern blacks, particularly former slaves, found themselves without medical care after leaving plantations. So she assisted them in getting them checkups, treated for illnesses, things like that. The resulting need led Crumpler and other black physicians to offer the care. It also encouraged many more black people to seek formal training because they saw where education was getting her.
Get farther. I wonder, whenever I hear about doctors like that, like I spoke about Irina Sendler's father did that. He treated all these poor Jewish people.
Yes, yeah.
I always wonder, like, then how did they live? Like, how did they make a living? Like, did they make a living? And if so, if they were always treating people like for hardly any money, how did they survive?
How are you surviving?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always curious about that whenever I hear people doing that. Like, did they have like their one rich client? And they just gouged them? They're like, you got money.
Those rates are all the way up. One thing I find just amazing in her story is that she was a witness, to what her aunt was doing.
Yeah.
And I can imagine her aunt helping her neighbors. And what they used to do was they would trade for sewing or they would trade for food. But also I'm imagining her aunt, and this is totally just my perception, but would take her with her. She assisted her aunt. She saw what these people were needing. And she continued, after gaining that education, to turn it around and give back, kind of. Despite the need for them, black practitioners were not usually welcome in post-war South.
Shocking.
I was really shocked at that one, yeah. There is some indication that Crumpler herself was not well received. One source suggests that men doctors snubbed her, the druggists balked at filling her prescriptions, and some people wisecracked that her MD behind her name stood for mule driver. Right?
Fuck them.
That.
And also, I was just going to say, like, the intersections of racism and sexism with her life must have been profound.
Yes. But to just could you imagine just trying to go get a prescription? You're a fucking doctor.
Well, it's her patients trying to go get them and have them signed from her, and her patients being denied that because the druggists didn't believe that it was a reliable doctor or whatever, a credible doctor.
Well, same thing as them hesitating to even graduate her. And it's like, and what does that mean, slow progress? Like when they said she had slow progress in gaining her education, but she still got there. Well, not everybody learns the same.
And I also don't believe that. Like, maybe her progress was slow because she was working the entire time, so it took her longer.
Yeah.
There is this, especially at the time, and still today, this overwhelming need to uphold racism. And it's easy to label people as slow or incapable or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Just trying to find a reason.
Yeah, to keep people down.
Exactly. Yeah, that really, really, like, mule driver, that one stuck a thorn in my side.
Yeah, and I'd really like to know, it sounds like it would be a white person saying that, but I'm like, when you're talking about, like, she mostly treated black patients, so there were probably also black pharmacies. So is this where we have that layer of misogyny?
Balking at her at the fact of being a woman.
Or is she, is it... Anyway, go ahead.
There's so many roads you could go on that one. So she didn't have a great experience going down to Richmond, Virginia. So in 1869, she returned to Boston, where it's quoted she practiced with, in quotations, renewed vigor. So she came home, the place where she got her education, probably where she knew people, where she was comfortable. It says, too, perhaps she felt more at home with her community where she had trained. She practiced there till 1880. Then her and her husband moved to Hyde Park, Massachusetts, where a lot of the residents there were primarily Black. She appears to not have active practice in 1883, but that is the year she published her book.
Look at her.
I know. The book is called A Book of Medical Discourses, which I really like that. It
sounds smart.
She sounds smart. So that's the year she published it, 1883. First Black woman medical publication, which is amazing. She advised women on the medical care for themselves and their children. So this was a book strictly for women and kids. She dedicated the volume to mothers and nurses to further the indication that she viewed her medical training primarily as preparation for her nursing work. Her MD was to be a nurse. According to her death certificate, she did die in 1895 at 64 years old in Massachusetts in Hyde Park, where she lived with her husband. So they ended their lives there. I did research the publication, and I actually found it's available at the U.S. National Library of Medicine in a digital version. And they actually have photos of the book page by page. So I read some of her publication, and I made a note to myself. Her writing is really detail-oriented. She's very factual. She does not, it goes down to even get a square of flannel 2 inches by 2 inches, one that you would find, one that is this color, one, like, she's very, very detail-oriented. The way she writes is she knows the best and the better way. Like, some of the chapters are headed as the better way to do this or the best way to do this. And so she's like, the intro to the book is, the following pages contain a few simple appeals to common sense. I thought that was amazing. Like, okay, here's a way to
dumbasses.
Fix it. Yes.
Here's what you should be doing, obviously.
I thought that, and just to see that written on the actual pages, like, it was really, really just a joy to see the actual pages. So yes, you can find that digital version, the U.S. National Library of Medicine. It's called A Book of Medical Discourses in 2 parts, published in 1883. Most of where I got my information about her was the American National Biography website, also Wikipedia, and then blackpast.org.
Did you find out if she ever had children?
No kids.
That would have also been like, this woman sounds like she was at the earliest form of being like radical.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
And the medical profession alone, to choose that as your path.
To keep pursuing to become a medical doctor, even though, I think that's interesting because you said there was no nursing school yet.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have had to have gone into the school to be a doctor in order to actually know. Like, you can, when you're in the field, you learn how to do things,
mm-hmm.
but you don't learn why you do them until you have the facts. This is why we have to do this. This is what happens in the body when this happens.
Mm-hmm.
So she would have, if she was really curious, which it sounds like she was a curious person,
mm-hmm.
and needed to know why. Okay, why do we create this tourniquet? What's happening in the body when we have a wound in an artery? Mm-hmm. What is an artery? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
She must have been the kind of person who wanted to know the reason for everything and not just, this is what you do.
Yeah. Well, I like how her education didn't stop. Like, she just kept learning because she knew that was only going to make her better and it was only going to help her patients more. So to me, that shows like a very big sense of care. She cared about her patients, mm-hmm. which a lot of male doctors do not, Well,
and the legacy now in healthcare, the most underserved population in America is Black women. Black pregnancies result in more complications and more deaths than any race in the country.
Yeah.
And Black women in America die in pregnancy, especially die at a higher rate than most women do in underdeveloped countries.
Oh my God.
And part of it has to do with this legacy of slavery, obviously. Mm-hmm. I was reading this article about how doctors, white doctors especially, don't believe Black people can feel pain. Or that they have a higher tolerance for pain.
Yeah.
And so they give them lower doses of medicine, and
that's torture.
It is. And it to me, it seems fascinating that someone who has gone through medical training and knows that once you peel away someone's skin, literally everything inside is the same as another person.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, everybody feels pain at the same level. Like that's, I mean, not at the same level, but like, you know, because some people do have higher tolerances for pain, but it's not like you cannot say.
You can't just say black people have a higher tolerance of pain.
Yes.
You can't blanket that on a race.
That is
subject person to person.
Bizarre to me. And I think when people deny that racism is still an everyday part of our life, that's the kind of stuff I want to show to them. Like, they're not going to listen to me when we talk about schools and prison systems and educational systems and higher education and loan programs and redlining. They're not going to listen to any of that shit. But what if I was just like, hey, why do black women die in pregnancy more often than anybody else then? These are literal doctors who think that black people don't feel pain.
Yeah.
Like,
can you help me with this one?
What do you say to that one?
What do you got? I'll take it. But so to the children, there was no mention of children. So honestly, I don't know if she did or not. I would imagine it would mention, but everything I was reading didn't mention that she had any children.
Well, and you said her husband outlived her. I would assume that they would also mention if she had children that they outlived her. It makes me wonder, though, if she ever got pregnant. Maybe, you know, maybe she just never wanted children. Maybe that wasn't her thing, you know, like some of us here.
Well, too, like primarily, so for her publication to be about women and babies and children, I read some of her chapters in her book. And I read this really fascinating chapter about how to get the knots out of your breast, like when your milk
when you get
ducts
clogged.
get clogged. She actually has a recipe in there for a poultice that I could freaking bottle and sell at Trader Joe's. Like, freaking white people would buy this shit.
Yeah, you sell it at
I could
Whole
sell
Foods.
it for $50 a bottle for like 4 ounces. It had
and then you got to just like be like, oh, this is a recipe handed down generations. It goes all the way back to the elders in Mexico, and then the white people be like, oh my god, I got this thing, and it is so
this
helpful.
beautiful little brown girl. She gave it to me. I think her name was
her
Chihuahua.
Great grandmother's recipe. Like this shit's it's like ancient. Like it's like real.
I would.
Then do it.
No. Actually had
Create
like
your little Etsy store.
yes.
Like people really dig that
They
shit.
do. They like their tonics and their potions that are high priced. I think the recipe called for what was really interesting was like honey and hops.
Oh, hops.
Yeah. And it was made into a poultice. And like even like she recommended like these teas that she would make. So I'm going to go back through and maybe write some stuff down and just, I don't have any clogged milk ducts, but I might know somebody who might need it.
Well, my sister-in-law will be soon.
There you go.
She really struggled with that with her first baby, and she's like 6 months along right now. No, not quite that long because she's due in March and it's only October right now.
All right, so yeah.
But
yeah,
this is
I'll write some stuff down.
This was a rough pregnancy. I mean, this one isn't, but like she lost 2 or 3 before this. Really desperately wants a baby. So this is
fingers
crossed.
Yeah.
We make it all the way to the finish line this time.
Where I was going with that, though, is like how she dedicated her book to women and children and how to get women through birth and get, you know, sick babies, croup and all that stuff. Maybe that was her baby. Like, you know how most women who will just dedicate themselves to something and that's their child for them. And two, maybe she saw it so much that it might have not been something she wanted to do.
I also wonder maybe if because we don't know, maybe she had tried and maybe couldn't
do it.
Maybe she kept having miscarriages or, you know.
No. I'm really surprised at the lack of personal documentation. Like, wouldn't you as a college student be writing stuff down or who knows, maybe it got thrown away?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if because she didn't have children, there wasn't anybody to pass it down to. So once her husband died,
boom, gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Right? They have just records of her, but not records from her. Mm-hmm. That would be my guess, is that if she didn't have children, which it sounds like she didn't, there would be no one to keep that stuff.
Yeah. So how I actually found her was because I was
Yeah, what's the connection to Audre Lorde?
going through the Instagrams, and I saw that quote, and I thought it was just kind of fascinating, and I was like, well, who's Audre Lorde? Because I didn't know her either. And the quote was connected to a website called capital URU, so U letter R U, therighttobe.org. And it's an organization that was created by this Black woman named Crystal R. Emery. She's a director, screenwriter, author, producer, and she directed a film called Black Women in Medicine.
Have you watched it?
I have not watched it.
Maybe that has more information on Rebecca's personal life.
So it was all keyed in. So this quote was used for this article she wrote on the URU, therighttobe.org, about, it's called STAT, an action plan for replacing the broke system of recruitment and retention of underrepresented minorities in medicine. So she began this article with that quote. So then I started reading this article about minorities in medicine. And she co-wrote it with this woman, she's a PhD, Carissa Colbreth, about the numbers basically in the U.S. of minorities in medicine and how they're declining. And even if minorities are getting into medicine, they are dropping out of school because A, they can't afford it, or they're being pushed out. They're receiving, they're the odd man out.
Or they're slow at progress, according to the people in charge of them. Slow at
progress. So her and this other woman wrote this article about the stats, basically, and a different way to dismantle racism in the medical profession. So I took a quote out of the beginning of her article. It says, multiple landmark studies describe the problem and propose solutions. Yet we find ourselves no closer to the goal of diversity within the medical field, specifically among practicing physicians. It is imperative that we look for new and innovative ways to bring about change. In academic medicine, the, in quotation, master's house is the institution of the medical school. So that's why the quote of, for the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house, which I thought was really neat. And this documentary she made is called Black Women in Medicine, documenting the chronicles of the unsung journey of the Black female doctor.
Very cool.
And it's a documentary series. I was trying to find where it's available to watch. It's available to watch on YouTube. And I think if you go to the URU, therighttobe.org, it's linked in there as well.
Okay.
So I have not watched the documentary. I want to.
Yeah.
This documentary was made in 2016. And one of the articles that I found was written up about this documentary to bring it to the forefront was written last month.
Okay. So it's also underserved and underrepresented.
Absolutely.
As a documentary.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of my experience in LA. Really? So I went to LA and went to the movie premiere of The Miseducation of Cameron Post, which is based on Emily Danforth's novel, which is why I was there, because I was with Emily. She's my mentor. And the movie won the Sundance Audience Award and then couldn't get distribution, could not get a production company to pay for it and to distribute it. It's a terrific film. They finally got a company to do it, and they released it this summer, and they just did this really limited release, hardly any kind of marketing for it. Mm-hmm. So the stars and the director were doing it for them.
Oh, wow.
They said that if they didn't get a certain amount of tickets sold, they wouldn't push it out even further. And so they did. It was a really limited run. They did the really limited beginning one, and then they did a second, they pushed it out to a few more theaters. So I could have seen it in Seattle and Tacoma, but I couldn't see it in Spokane. It never came here.
Never came. No. And I was looking for it too, because I thought maybe the Magic Lantern would have it or something, but.
And she and the director spoke a lot about that this was because this movie was made by starred queer women. Well, Chloe's not queer, but the story is of a queer girl. And she was like, if I had been a man, if this had been a movie made about a man, maybe we would have gotten more money. It would have been distributed. People would have seen it. And it basically sabotaged the success of the film, which it is a successful film. It's a great film. Go watch it. Go buy it. Buy it on Amazon or wherever you can find it, because queer women of color deserve your money. especially when they make really good movies. That's a really good movie.
Well, finding this woman, Crystal R. Emery, she's also quadriplegic. So she has two diseases that follow with that. Didn't go into what diseases she has, but she's got a full-on respirator on her face, I think, to help her breathe. And so for her to overcome her disability, and still she's been writing and producing, educating for over 20 years, which is awesome. Then to go to Rebecca's story, to this documentary that's made in 2016 of still the underrepresentation of Black women in the medical field. It's like, my God, the 1800s to now. It's like, when, if not now, when?
Yeah. We got, hey, any Black women listening, you should go into medicine.
But I'm really excited to see this documentary.
Yeah, let's do it together. Let's watch it.
That'd be fun. Yeah. But I really liked Rebecca's story, and I started researching a little bit more about this Crystal R. Emery. She's done quite a bit. So visit her website, the youareyoutherightobe.org. She's got lots of fun links in there, and that's where that article is at.
Well, thank you for sharing. That was great. I really enjoyed learning about this first medical doctor who was a Black woman.
I liked your revolutionary.
Yeah, who was also biracial.
I know. We kind of hit on the same notes there.
Yeah, and who was also a caretaker. Like, she was the guardian.
Yeah,
she took care of people. She made sure they were safe. Although she did it in a real badass way with a knife and a gun and a.
Any way we can do it. Women take care, don't we? Yeah. We are the caregivers.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I enjoyed this. Do you have anything you heard in the news or saw and you wanted to say good for you, lady?
Oh.
Femme-identified person?
Yeah, I recently discovered a young, I'm totally not that old, I know that, but what do you call like a young person who they're just, their life is social media? They do it for a job.
Oh, an influencer?
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm too old for that shit. I think it's lame.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You do you. I just don't understand. But there's this young queer Latina girl that started this Instagram called the Unapologetically Brown series.
Oh, cool.
And
Great name.
I know, right? She started this campaign where she does street art. And she does street art that campaigns towards Latinas. And she'll put inspirational quotes up that are directed towards you. So imagine you're walking down the street and you see something that's directed directly towards you, telling you you're beautiful or something inspiring. Oh. So she does that. She plants it out throughout the city. I believe it's in New York. I have to relook. It might be New York or LA, but one of the big cities. She just has this uplifting, powerful, just love yourself in your skin, unapologetically brown. Like, her artwork is really cool too. It's really colorful, really beautiful. And I just recently discovered it, and it's been just fun to look at every day, because then you just see those quotes and you try to believe them, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I actually, I saved this Instagram video that Lizzo made. I've shared Lizzo. Lizzo is a pop and R&B, and I don't know, not really R&B, but she does sing sometimes. But she's a musician from Minneapolis. And she is a Black woman who also is a large Black woman. I don't know if she likes the term fat. I don't try to call people fat if they don't like that term. Mm-hmm. But she put out this Instagram video where she's laying in bed and she keeps switching her phone back and forth. And it's like, hey, you're so pretty. What, me? Yes, you. And it loops and it just keeps doing it. And so I love watching that, because it's like, oh, I need to tell myself that affirmation.
You need to tell yourself that every day. Yeah.
I need to tell myself that I have beauty.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that you guys all think that too. You have beauty. That's what we're here to say. You have beauty.
You're beautiful.
Your stories should be heard. So come back and listen to more stories.
Find your fire.
Love you.
Love you. I don't smell like weed.